Hey, that's my mom calling. I better take this real quick. Hey, Mom. I'm kind of working on a podcast here, but did I tell you about the podcast?
Oh, yeah. I was really excited. I just don't know much about it, though.
Well, it's just kind of like when you were a little girl, I'm assuming you sat around the radio and listened to stories, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
And it was kind of like TV before TV, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so there was characters or what was there?
Stella Dallas was what Mother and I watched.
Well, you didn't watch it, you listened to it.
Yeah, we listened to it.
Yeah. Anything else that you remember? Or?
Lum and Abner.
Oh, Lum and Abner. Now, was this a weekly deal or what was it?
Nightly.
Nightly?
See, 4 o'clock was Stella Dallas, and of an evening was the Lum and Abner, and Dad liked it. That's about the only thing he liked.
What year would that have been? Early 50s, probably?
Early 50s,
maybe
yeah.
Late 40s?
Yeah, it'd have been probably in the 49s and 50s.
So you could actually entertain yourself just by sitting there and listening to somebody?
Well, yeah. That's all we knew. We just turned the radio on, and you didn't run it much because it was run by battery, and we couldn't afford to buy very many batteries.
Well, that's kind of what this podcast is. It's basically, obviously a lot more technical, but it is on the radio. And, when you're driving down the road by yourself or with family, it doesn't matter, that you can tune in and you can listen to, stories. There's some that's virtually about anything and everything you want. You like my Snap stories, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's basically what's going to happen. It'll give you and Dad something more to listen to. And it's called the Genuine JBH because everybody that's going to be on it is genuine. Or is genuinely good people, and that's kind of like what we want, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's almost time for me to get dinner, so I probably better hang up.
Hey, speaking of that, did you know that on the new online T-shirt store that you've got your own personal T-shirt?
Oh, come on.
Oh, yeah, Rosie's Diner.
Oh, mercy sakes.
Oh, yeah. Now you're going to want it to be the top seller, aren't you?
Well, it will be.
now you know where I get that from, folks. I better get back to work here, Mom, and you got dinner to make, so I'll leave you alone for now. But hey, thanks for calling.
Yeah, you bet. I'll talk to you later, hon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to the Genuine JBH podcast. Now, here's your host, J. Bradley Hook.
Ladies and gentlemen, the much anticipated first episode of the first season of the Genuine JBH podcast is officially here. Man, it's good to see you. Well, I can't really see you, but I can feel your presence. I'm so excited for you to listen to what I've been assembling here over the past few months, and I think you're going to be tickled. I think you're going to be entertained, and we're going to back this music on out of here and kind of get started talking about the particulars of the first season. Well, the Genuine JBH podcast is going to be a little different. It's going to be set up more like a Netflix series. There will be a season, and there will be X amount of episodes per season, and they will all kind of correlate and evolve around that season's theme or topic. Well, the theme for season 1 is the livestock semen industry.
Well, that's awkward.
And we're going to address it from many different angles. Well, my vision for this podcast is to be kind of a cross between the History Channel and Joe Rogan. And you'll see right out of the gate with my guests, truly genuine people that have that have made history in just living their lives. Well, let's dive right into talking about the livestock semen industry. You're like, now wait a minute, you're going to make an entire season around livestock semen? I thought bulls bred cows and boars bred sows and rams bred ewes and bucks bred does. I just really don't understand what we're going to talk about. Well, obviously, we're going to talk about the artificial insemination of livestock and how it has evolved from the beginning until now, how it has affected people's lives and their livelihoods for centuries, actually. And the simple act of wanting to go to AI school when I was a boy ended up changing my life forever. And just as it changed my life, it was also changing numerous others across the world as they were writing history and didn't know it. People that were just living their lives in the livestock industry, doing their very best, chasing their vision and their dreams, and watching them unfold. These are genuine people and genuine events that I want you all to know about. I hope this season featuring the livestock semen industry is both educational and entertaining to listeners of all ages. Special thanks to all my guests in this first season who contributed their insight and life stories to making it all possible. All right, let me set you up for this first interview by taking you to Elk City, Oklahoma, to my Holiday Inn Express suite, room number 316, if you believe in ironic coincidence. That's Heatseeker's old cane code, where I'm waiting on a fella to drive in 7 miles from the K-Bar Ranch in Canute, Oklahoma.
You're listening to the Genuine JBH podcast, sponsored by Amos Welding, Voss Angus, Catalog Livestock Listing Service, powered by SteerBidder.com, Wilkerson Farms, and Custom Tees of Middle Georgia.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am over the moon excited to have this gentleman sitting across from me right now. We've been friends for I don't want to tell you how many years. He is a living legend to anyone in the show cattle industry, and it's going to be my honor and privilege to introduce him to those of you out there who haven't maybe heard of him or aren't in the show cattle industry, and we're just going to have a blast here for a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, the guy sitting across from me, that's Mr. Dean Kephart. How are you, Dean?
I'm very good. How are you?
Man, I'm good. It's good to see you. Been probably 15 years since I've seen you, but let's just go ahead and back the music out of here and kind of get started. Dean, let's start out at ground level here for anybody that's listening that might not even be ag related. Just tell them your name and where you're located, and just kind of go from there.
Oh, my name's Dean Kephart. I live over here at Canute, Oklahoma. Lived there all my life. Been married to my wife Sissy for fixing to be 45 years here in a few days, and got 3 girls, and 2 of the girls showed cattle, and all of them were active in sports, and just a typical farm family out there.
Yeah. I don't know that typical needs to be used there, because you have accomplished. You've made history, and that's obviously why you're here. Dean, the first season of the Genuine JBH podcast is on the semen industry, and as we're going to find out here in a bit as we get into Dean's story, he was one of the pioneers in the club calf industry, semen sales, and I just think it's going to be a really, really fun podcast, especially for the show cattle people. But we're going to keep her down there where if you're not show cattle, that you kind of understand just what all went on and how big a deal it is. Well, Dean, let's just go back to how you got started actually in show cattle, or in cattle period, or just kind of your life as a boy growing up and to this point.
Okay. Back probably when I was in school, I was like the cattle part of the deal. And as a kid back in 7th, 8th grade, there was an ag teacher at Canute, and his name was Larry Horn. Larry stayed around for a year or so before I got into ag, but he was very active, and everybody's familiar and knows Brandon Horn and some of his brothers and stuff. And anyway, Larry moved off, and boy, we was all disappointed because he was going to be really active in showing and stuff, and we was really interested in wanting to show some cattle. But then they hired a man by the name of Alan Copus. Alan was my ag teacher all the time growing up, and he was like a second dad, and his son Mark, he stayed at the house all the time. He was a few years younger than me, and we showed cattle, and we traveled, and got ate up with it. And
now wait a minute. Let's back up here.
You're telling me that Mark Kopus, who is also a living legend now, his dad was your ag teacher.
He was my ag teacher.
No kidding.
And we went and bought cattle in Kansas and Nebraska and South Dakota, and just a kid, a freshman and sophomore in high school. And
let me interrupt you one more time. Let's back up to the first ag teacher. You said that's Brandon Horn's
dad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Brandon is way at the top of BDR and all the bulls he's got. He's changed the industry too.
Doing a good job.
That's crazy. That is crazy. Okay, go ahead.
So I was inspired by a couple big time people in my books. Anyway, we just, we went to every show that you could go to as kids. And then, of course, when you're doing that, you're meeting people. And
this is year what, basically?
Oh, that was probably it would have been in the early 70s, like 1970.
So what type of cattle would you have been showing then that you remember?
The exotic cattle, that Charolais cattle just come in. And then the Chianina cattle, then the Maine cattle. And I can remember the first Simeon Maine cattle that I ever seen was in Wood Lake, Nebraska. We bought some.
Who would have had them, you remember?
There was a ranch, Bob Reese. My first crossbred show steer come from a guy by the name of Larry Hollers, lived up there at Cody, Nebraska.
Oh, man.
And Larry Hollers was Jerry Adamson's brother-in-law.
Oh, no way.
We become real good friends, and he wound up, and I don't think that Larry's alive right now. Jerry is.
Yes.
And
I've done a lot of work for Jerry over the years.
And me and Jerry become good friends and had a lot of things in common. We like cattle. We like cows. Jerry was a big hunter. And he hunted with greyhounds, and I hunted with greyhounds, and we just had a lot in common and still talk once in a while. That was back in the probably 70, 71. That's been a few days ago.
The young people today, I don't want to call them kids. I just want to call them young people. What they don't understand is there wasn't club calf sales to go to. There wasn't club calves then.
It was just wanting to start.
It was just very at the inception.
And back then, when all we had was our English cattle, our Hereford or Angus or Shorthorn cattle. And I can remember it was the year 1968, and I was an 8th grader. And I never forget, my dad said, "What would you like for Christmas?" And I said, "I'd like to go to AI school." And he said, "Hell, I ain't never heard of an AI school." So ABS had a deal. Bob Reese's ranch up there at Wood Lake, Nebraska. He lived 27 miles south of Wood Lake, and the population of Wood Lake's probably 30 people. We go up on Christmas break, and I go to AI school, and that's when everything's ampules and straws. And she can be pretty cold in Nebraska at Christmas time. And we got up there, and I about froze my old butt off in that barn and stuff. And I had a bunch of guys not too long ago was cleaning out an office and kind of getting ready for a club cast sale. And there's all laughing in there. There was an old certificate where I'd went to AI school.
Oh, my.
In 1968.
Oh, my. That's awesome. That needs framed and hung right there.
Yeah.
The semen industry, what companies do you remember back then getting semen off of? First of all, when would you have first AI'd yourself then?
That would have been in 1968. ABS would have been about the only one I knew of. Yeah. It wasn't nothing like it is now. There was nobody selling semen. No individual selling semen.
And not very many. The bulls were very few and far between in that area.
Yeah. We had a key bull that we bought and got imported in from Italy.
Really?
My bull's name was Frigio.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
You had Frigio.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We got off on a tangent there, but let's go back to you showing, Dean. Well, no, let's don't. Let's go back. You touched on something that I think needs explained. Up to 1968 or 69 or 70, you mentioned you had your English breeds. And for those people out there for the younger generations, explain that.
Well, we just had our little old 1,000-pound Angus cows. And
Angus? Hey, JBH, don't we know an Angus breeder?
Well, yes, we do, and it would be a good time for me to tell you about one of our Season 1 sponsors, Voss Angus. That's Voss, V as in Victor, O-S-S, Angus, located at Dexter, Iowa. Well, Voss Angus is family-owned and operated, and actually a customer of mine. And until I personally met Brent Voss, I had no idea just how genuine a person he actually is. Their number one goal is to raise the very best cattle that have the highest performance, longevity, and earning potential for their customers, and are absolutely committed to offering you a product that will stand up to your program's demands. The Voss Angus production sale is always in mid-February, but feel free to visit their Facebook page anytime. And if you have questions, call Brent, Nick, Brant, Brighton, or Ben, and they'll be glad to help you out.
And now, back to the podcast.
Yep. And made some trips up there, and some of them guys had AI'd 1 or 2 years before we'd even heard of it. And that AI'd these little Angus cows to some Maine bulls and stuff, and you go out there, and whether they're any good for today's time or not, I don't know, but they were a lot better than what we were used to looking at.
So explain to everybody kind of what we were facing or fighting, actually, with the English breeds in comparison to the exotic breeds.
Well, probably at that time, the English breeds was hung up on a size of not much performance, and cattle not very big. And
we were talking about fat Angus steers weighing what, 800, 900 pounds?
Yeah, probably going to town at 900 pounds versus 1,400 pounds now.
1,500,
and gaining a pound or so a day instead of 3.5 pounds a day like they do now. That changed everything. Now, of course, people's got interested and the breeding's got better, and they got these English cattle where they're good.
Exactly. It's not like the English cattle went away.
No. You had to have the base.
Exactly.
That was the base for what went on in the mains and the semis.
Exactly.
There wasn't no black semis when they come over.
No.
And there was no black keys, and there was no black mains.
Exactly.
You had your red and white mains, and your red and yellow semis, and your white keys.
Yep.
And so our English cattle put an influence in all that, and still there and always will be.
Actually, it was probably the inception of crossbreeding.
Oh, absolutely.
And then from the crossbreeding, we started trying to change the full-blood breeds. And
you know, like some of them old key bulls, hell, that one we had, I don't know how tall they were.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them were 7 foot tall.
Yeah,
you know,
they called them great whites, didn't they?
Yeah.
And there was a reason for that. I mean, these things were like Belgian horses.
Exactly.
They were huge, and some of the dispositions were good, and some of them not so good.
And the cattle that they were using to win after they crossed them up were big, tall cattle. You couldn't hardly get one that the taller the better, and it went to one extreme and kind of it went to some of the other extremes back. You know, it fluctuates. But
today's show ring, what are our high mains? Or not our high mains, our high keys? They have to be what? 3/16 or something?
3/16, 1/8. You can show.
Granted, the first time you put Frigio on a Pony Angus cow, that was a half blood.
That was a half blood.
A half blood. So it did take them down from 10 feet tall, but they were still big framed. And so all of a sudden we go from a 850, 900 pound fat steer to a half blood key Angus. And what do you remember how they were perceived, or how they were welcomed, or how they were hated? Or
I think probably not as many cared much about it. You know, they're going to be cattle, they're going to kill your cows, and it's just going to be a tough deal. And a lot of them guys, you know, it's a new deal, so a lot of the old farmers, old ranchers didn't want no part of it. You know,
stubborn
until they seen, and then those cattle got to bringing more to town. And then
that's what I was wondering. Were they accepted even through the commercial stockyards?
Not at first, I don't think, but it wasn't long that, you know, they caught on. You know, you're selling 250 pounds more on the same cow.
Exactly.
So,
and when stockyards sell weight, you wouldn't think they'd fight it too
pays
long.
Bills.
You betcha. Let's go back to you starting your own personal showing as a boy. What kind of recollection do you have on those first show steers you had?
I remember actually the first calf I ever had was a Hereford steer, and we showed it, and the calf made this sale at Tulsa, and we thought that was the biggest, greatest thing ever, New ag teacher, first calf, make the premium sale at Tulsa. We didn't have a clue, none of us, what was going on, but we was trying to learn,
Exactly. So I'm guessing as a boy, you weren't in the cool room.
Oh, no.
With the air turned down to 40 degrees working hair.
Now, we had some misters. We combed them, and there wasn't such thing as blowing on one back then. You wet them down and you combed them dry, and you had combs that put some curls in their hair.
Yep, those were called liners, weren't they?
Yeah.
And I'm betting you had 2 or 3 rice rip brushes later.
Oh, yeah. When you fitted cattle, there wasn't as anything like an adhesive. Old saddle soap, pull the legs, and
little bar wax. Maybe a little Amway soap in there.
Oh, yeah.
Just curious, you had Champion Hereford at Tulsa that year. What?
No. Made the premium sale.
Made the premium sale.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what won the show? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember.
I mean, would it have been in English or would it have been a cross? Because
I'm going to say it was probably a crossbred. Okay. They were just getting going, and they were bigger and better than our English cattle.
Yeah, just more everything. And wasn't it about that time that Eldon Miller would have won Denver with the old Shar-Cross steer?
That wasn't Big Mac, was it?
Yeah, that was Big Mac.
Yeah.
Boy, I'd like to talk to Eldon about that one.
Yeah, that was probably a year or two after that. White steer that might have got darker.
Yeah, he got darker. Yeah,
and won Denver.
Yeah, good. I mean, that's some good stuff. We're 50 years after that now. We can surely talk about it sometime. So let's go from you showing as a boy. I mean, we talked about you starting the show. So let's just fast forward to the end of your show career. Did you knock down any big banners, or was it just more?
I never won nothing. Yeah. Just a breed champion once in a while, and made the premium sales. Never did win a big show. Just liked it, and there was some guys that was winning, and you went and watched them and wanted to be like them.
Yeah, that is exactly right. It just appears in everybody that's a legend now's story. You don't start out at the top. If you do start out at the top, you don't appreciate nothing.
It would be pretty hard to start.
It would be extremely hard. But so we graduate high school, and then what do we do?
Actually, I went to work for Jerry Bonham for a while.
Jerry Bonham. Now that last name sounds familiar.
That would be Steve Bonham's dad.
No way.
I fitted cattle for them for a while. Way. After that, I went to Welding.
Now, Welding is what? A town or an establishment?
Welding is like Welding Steel.
Oh, you went to Welding?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And
hey, don't we know a welder?
Well, yes, we do. And a very successful one at that. And they just happen to be one of this season's sponsors of the Genuine JBH podcast. Let me tell you about Amos Welding, located in Rushville, Indiana. Well, Eric Amos grew up a farm boy with a welder, a work ethic, and a wild imagination of what could be built if you only set your mind to it. Well, just a few short years later, Amos Welding is now the premier manufacturer of high-quality, affordable, custom pins and gates. And it doesn't matter if you're building new or simply remodeling your existing facility. Amos Welding will build to your specs. So whether it's county fairgrounds that need new pins or your working facility that could sure use some continuous fencing, give Eric Amos a call. He's more than happy to brainstorm with you on how to best customize your working facility, barn, or trailer. Better yet, go to the Amos Welding Facebook page and see for yourself. You know those straight-up bars that's been so popular for Sullivan Supply? Yeah, patented and built by Amos Welding. As much time and money as you spend with your livestock, you deserve the quality, security, and peace of mind that Amos Welding products will give you.
And now, back to the podcast.
Done that for a while. Then I went to work
on a pipeline or what?
No, I was actually working for a company by the name of Fontaine. They make Fontaine floats and fifth wheels for semis and stuff. Then I went from that to the oil field for a while.
Which you're in an oil field area right here at Canute.
And, had no money to do nothing with. And I remember my first oil field job paid almost $5 an hour.
Oh, my.
And my welding, I was making $2.10 an hour.
Oh, my.
Anyway, went to welding and done that. Went to the oil field and done that for about 7 years and moved right up and had a really good job.
So you would have been 25?
Yeah, probably somewhere in there. And I was dabbling in the cattle a little bit.
Or was there a time you just kind of vacated it, or you was always kind of involved?
Always had a few cows. And my dad had probably 240 acres of land, and I got to keep a handful of cows out there. And I just thought, gosh dang, I just can't stand this oil field. It's good money, but it's not what I want to do.
Right.
And I know it's going to be tough, but I went back to where I went to AI school in Nebraska, and the guy's name was Bob Reese. I told him I wanted to buy some cows, and I went up and he sold me a set of half-blood Maine cows. They were Covino 3s.
Oh, yeah, red and white. Covino 3 was red and white.
Right. They were half Angus, half Maine. Covino 3s, Cunhas, some Cossacks, some Capones.
Yep. Which would have been the very first Maine Anjou full-blood bulls imported.
The very first. And some Epinols. And I bought 20 cows from him, and he sold them cattle to me for exactly market price.
Oh, no way.
He said, I'm going to help you get started.
So was these cows all black then?
There's all black.
Yeah.
Brought them in and started AIing to some of the bulls, like Paul Clapp had a bull called Black Power Play.
You bet.
Actually, on them, things went right to, Kez went right to winning pretty good.
Well, and that's funny. Dean Kephart, speaking from a fellow breeder, Dean Kephart always had an extremely stout base, and that was just always a given. I knew Epinol always rang true with your herd. I did not know how your herd got established. It's very, very, very intriguing to me to go back into history like that. A buddy of mine, he's here in Texas now. In fact, I think they just won a major, maybe San Antonio. About 5 years ago, he decided he had a real good Angus female. He decided to put some Cunha in there and flush her and just see what we got. They're not quite like a guy remembers, though.
No, it's a little different. There's still some of them old bulls back on the right ones still get good half-bloods, but there's so many good cattle out there.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I talked in a previous podcast with a young man. I'm not sure that people understand that you have to have a vision, and you have to breed for what you like, and you have to breed for pieces, and you have to, you have to prioritize your physical and genetic traits. What made you go to that guy up there?
Well, I thought that was the route I wanted to go, was those half and 3/8 Maine cattle for my base cows to go with the choke steer part of the deal. And I knew he was doing it because he was doing it when I went to AI school in 68. And they had a little feedlot, and those guys run
Describe his personality to me. Was he a typical rancher? What would have made him just jump on that Maine Anjou train?
He was just a real laid back, quiet spoken, hard working, typical Nebraska, South Dakota type rancher back then.
Yeah.
I mean, from where he lived to Valentine, Nebraska, that was the biggest town. It was 70 miles.
And that's Valentine, for those of you who don't know. I believe that's Cherry County, right?
Cherry County, Nebraska.
Isn't that the largest county in the nation? Like I say, I have been there. You feel like you're banging your head on the clouds when you're up there for some reason.
That's a metropolis for them, versus other little towns around there.
Yeah. So Dean Kephart in 2020 has to look back and think the guy that started your base, he either got lucky or he had a vision.
Yeah, I think he had a vision.
Yeah.
I think his main vision was the Simmental's, because he got to raising quite a few purebreds and full-blood semis, and he had some stuff imported in. But it was tough on those guys back then. They went through a period of time up there where FHA or one of them was tough on them, and the foreclosed on a bunch of those guys. They were spending money on those cattle and not getting the money back out of them yet, because what you talked about a while ago, some of these other guys hadn't accepted it yet.
Exactly. And to reiterate a point that a young man made in a previous podcast, he says we were so far ahead we thought we were behind.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And in retrospect, your man, what was his name again?
Bob Reese.
Bob Reese was actually so far ahead he was behind, and
there was a lot of those guys up there in that area that was doing the same thing. All of them kind of got in the same boat and trouble because they loved them cattle. Them cattle were better, and they weren't accepted quite like they needed to be quite yet.
And that's, it's kind of, it's history. It's truly history in the making right there. It'd be interesting to, if any of those little boys are alive, to talk about that because, although we got Here I Am right now and I had Heat Seeker and you had Full Throttle and this, that, and the other, they didn't just happen.
No.
We were in line, but there was a road paved way ahead of us that we got to travel down. So, well, obviously I know, but I'm going to say I'm dying to know, Dean, how did those cows work out for you? Was it a complete wreck or?
No, it was a home run.
I obviously know, and that's obviously why you're sitting right here, right now on the Genuine JBH podcast, talking about the semen industry, because what you established or what you created or what you accomplished over the next 2 or 3 decades is it's legendary. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. So with these cows, you're 25, 6, 7 years old. Fast forward till you get just real quickly how you grew your herd and then how you started selling calves.
I didn't have any bulls that I was cleaning up with, so it was a complete 100% AI. Everything was AI.
Let me interrupt you there. Let's back up. What made you get in on Frio? Who approached you?
Well, I don't remember exactly. My dad kind of found the deal, and he wasn't in the club calf deal, but he kind of found it, and the key deal looked like was going to be a big deal. And anyway, I really don't know how he found it, but I know that bull got imported into Nebraska, and we went up and picked him up.
Yeah, man.
And we used him around and didn't like his calves as good as what was getting on our AI stuff. And he was the first bull that we had that was our cleanup bull, but we were pretty much AI and would turn him out and get a few calves every year. But
all right, let's go back. How did you started out? You said with those 20. How fast did you progress number wise?
Oh, probably a year, and I doubled, and then I got where I was selling. There were some little club calf sales just starting up. We was taking them calves to them and getting dang good money for back then.
And you're doing this full time now?
Yeah, I started doing it full time.
Yeah,
and then actually I had a neighbor over here at Elk City. His name was Jim Walters, Kyle Walters' uncle, and they used to raise Herefords on the Walters Ranch, and then they bought a bunch of black bulls, Angus bulls, and so they had a bunch of F1 black baldies.
Sure.
Jim went and bought a bunch of 3/4 Maine Angie bulls and put with them, and there was a bunch of black and black baldy 3/8 Maine cows out there.
There we go.
I drove by them, and these cows were back then, and probably even now, was kind of ahead of their time, a little wow factor on them things. And I stopped in, talked to Jim, and I think I bought like 30 some of them. And actually one group of cows that I bought from Jim raised either a breed champion or the reserve grand steer at every one of them at a major show.
Oh my. It's funny how, just like when you drove by that herd, it's just almost like a gut feeling in it.
They're just better. They were just better, Yeah. And still today, I don't know that so many of them do it. You drive by and you kind of slow down, God dang.
Yeah, exactly.
These cattle are good.
Yeah.
Maybe one want to see who owns them cattle, and that we did a lot of that back then.
I want to tell you a Dean Kephart story and see if you remember it. And it's basically identical to the story you just told me. I remember one time you were in my home area and you were I'm on the Iowa-Missouri line, and you were just south of me in Missouri, and some old boy was moving a bunch of Charolais cross cows.
Yes, sir.
And you liked them, and you basically tracked him down, and you basically sorted off what you needed and bought them, didn't you?
I sure did.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just got to pay attention in life. And whenever your gut's churning and telling you something, don't be afraid to go with it if you can, right?
It don't cost much to stop and ask and talk to people.
No, it doesn't.
Most of them's tickled to death to see somebody's interested.
You didn't.
Everybody likes selling stuff.
You didn't Snapchat him or text message him or on your smartphone then? Or
Didn't have none of that. None of that. No.
It sounds to me like a reoccurring theme here. You weren't afraid to just only go with the best you could find. You didn't want just cows. You wanted the best you could find, right?
Yeah, after the cow deal, wanted to raise some bulls, which wanting to and getting to is pretty hard to do.
You started out raising club calves to sell. Let's go back to that point.
Yeah, started raising club calves to sell, and that's what we were doing.
And how were you doing it?
Just everything either private or at a few little invitational club calf sales. There was some over by Chattanooga. There was some at Stillwater, Cordell, Oklahoma.
I think Chris Black said something about is it a Pampa or
seemed like there was some sales around Pampa, and there was some sales even in New Mexico starting up. Just at that time it wasn't hard to get in, call them,
right.
and sure, bring us 4 or 5.
And once again, these are not sales that you look at on your laptop.
No.
Let me tell you about the Catalog Livestock Listing Service. That's Catalog, CATTLELOG, Livestock Listing Service. Well, online sales have been going on for nearly a decade now. And if the online bidding format is still successfully working for your operation, then I highly suggest that you don't change. But if you've ever thought, man, it would be nice to open the sale with online bidding, yet close with a friendly, more personal phone call to your new bidder or old customer, then you might want to give the Catalog a thought. The Catalog is powered by SteerBidder.com, which hosts some of the most viewed cattle in the online livestock sale world. Having pictures and video online is a necessity, but how you seal the deal can now be up to you. Once again, if you're happy with how your exclusive online bidding is going for your operation, then don't change a thing. But if you'd like to add a personal touch back into your livestock merchandising, then contact myself or Chris Rosa. More information can be found at SteerBidder.com.
And now, back to the podcast.
These are sales that you got in your vehicle with your family and you drove to, and you didn't see about them on the internet. You saw about them in a print ad somewhere or word of mouth. A buddy of yours called and told you, and then you physically got up and you physically drove there and you physically bid to an auctioneer in a sale. Or you had private treaty back then, right?
Yeah, some private treaty, but the higher cattle was selling in the sales.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, the higher cattle. Let's talk about what your average ones would have brought. Let's talk about back then what your highest ones would have brought.
There was a sale at Cordell. This was, probably in the middle 70s, maybe close to the early 80s, and averaged probably $5,500.
Really?
And that was that's not all horrible now.
Oh, no, not at all. And so let's go back to that sale. I'm sure there was something in there that pushed the average up, but what was the high and what was the...
I had a calf brought $8,900.
$8,900.
It was a black power play out of one of them cows I'd bought from Jim Walters.
I'll be.
That steer wound up. He won a bunch in some prospect deals, never did, and he was for Oklahoma City. He didn't win Oklahoma City.
Was he a baldy?
He was a baldy. After that, I wound up flushing that cow.
Really? That would have been some of the first embryo transplant work.
There wasn't much of that going on. Some of that was being done surgically.
Oh, really?
Back then, instead of going in
flushing
the cow, and putting it in the horn, you did it surgically.
Who would have done your first embryo work that you remember?
Nick Wells out of Stillwater.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and
was he with the college or on his own?
No, he was on his own. Les Hutch, that has REI at Stillwater now, bought him out, done that. Man. And Les was a trainee way back then as a little old kid.
Oh, man.
And come out and helped him. Then we had a full brother to that one that Jill Copas won Oklahoma City with.
Jill would be Mark's sister. Okay.
3 years in a row, we had brothers to him that was champion main at Houston out of that cow. Anyway, just good producing cattle that was consistent for the times, you know, and those cattle almost was borderline of being ahead of their time.
Yeah.
We worried about them not being big enough. For that time. But they were still massive and stuff. And clip different cooler rooms. They could probably been somewhat competitive now. Maybe not as good as some of them right now, but
I don't think what today's, I will say kids, because I'm talking about when you're the ones old enough to even start showing and working hair, they can't appreciate the whole hair cycle we went through to get to where we are today. I mean, just like you said in 1970, it was rice root brush and water hose.
Yeah, I owned a bull at that time, full flush or full throttle.
Yeah.
Full throttle was before full flush. And you owned a bull.
Yeah.
Heat seeker.
You betcha.
And Larry Campbell, become a good friend and a good customer of mine. And your bull was one of the first big hair throwers.
Yeah, it really was.
Kind of dirty before his time.
Yeah.
And we had one, a shorthorn bull, double stuff.
Amen.
Didn't have a clue what was going on. A friend of mine and his partners on the bull, and we're still good friends. And he raised some really, really good shorthorn cattle, Wendell Dunn.
Yeah. Well, let me stop you right there and let me tell you another Brad Hook, Dean Kephart story. I can still remember vividly, what do you call these Oklahoma-style pickups that have not a bed, but
the Western Hauler?
The Western Hauler. And I don't really know. I'm sure I called you or I'm sure I knew how you were headed this way, but I remember Dean pulling in that Western Hauler, and he had, 2 or 3 or 4 semen tanks there in the back. We were going to I was starting a little deal called the Pasture Purple program, and Dean dropped off some full throttle, some witch doctor, some double stuff, some taken names, and I think that was probably all I got off you that trip. But that was my first actual interaction with you. Now I'm sure, and let's fast forward that to how far ahead you were in the game. Up till that time, I don't know why you were there. I don't think you were driving around the country selling semen specifically. I think you were probably there to look at some cattle or something. That's the name of the game in 2020 now, and you were doing it in 1990.
Well, I was looking at cattle, but I was toting a semen tank because we messed around and had some bulls that people were interested in.
All right, with that being said, let's go ahead and start in on that segment. Once again, this is a Genuine JBH podcast, and season 1's theme is the semen industry. So, Dean Kephart, legend, when was the first time promoting a bull entered your head?
I don't really know how it happened. It just more or less happened.
Which bull was the first one that happened to you with?
The first bull that was the biggest hit bull for me was probably Full Throttle.
Right.
I'd actually bought some 3/4 main cows from Deanie Dillard at Cross Plains, Texas, that he had got imported out of Canada. And I'd kept them cows. I'd bred them. He was a Sugar Ray.
Exactly. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the show cattle industry, there is like a hierarchy of sires that just kept changing history. And so far, Dean has mentioned Black Power Play, and now he's talking about raising Full Throttle, which changed the industry. But if we back up to the bull he just talked about, Sugar Ray,
belonged to Bobby May.
Belonged to Bobby May, and
hit the steers out of that bull was winning. So naturally, if you want to stay with the deal and you want to be on top of the game, you need to be using what's winning.
Exactly.
And Sugar Ray was winning, and I went from Black Power Play of a changed time to Sugar Ray, and he worked on the same cows. And
let's talk about that just a bit. You're not shotgunning 15 different bulls into these cows, are you?
No, I pretty well windrowed one bull.
Yeah.
And I may own a lot of cows right now.
Right.
And I use more than one, but I don't use 30.
Right.
And there is guys that use 30. And I always said cows were so messed up, or you just flat didn't know what you wanted to do.
I'm afraid it's more the latter. It could be either, but I'm afraid it's more. I'm just, as I talked about in the previous podcast, I'm just not sure people realize they have to have a vision. I think they are caught up in sensationalism of the social media now versus what used to be. And that's one thing we are going to talk about is that ad you had here coming up on these bulls once you started promoting. But don't let me forget to do that, because it was was monumental. But the vision that you had, you knew what was going to work, or you had seen what worked. And so Sugar Ray produced Full Throttle. What made Full Throttle? Was he one that just...
There was some Sugar Ray sons out there, but it didn't seem like they were working. And of course, once something doesn't work just like you want, everybody goes, well, that bull, there'll never be anything out of him. Anyway, we raised him, and he looked like ahead of his time. He was long-fronted and thick and stuff. And yeah, he was a pretty tough Kevin deal. He wasn't no heifer bull by no means. He was pretty tough.
Since you mentioned that, let me back up and ask you. I don't want to lose our track here, but let me back up and ask you, when the imports started coming over, going into the Pony Angus and the small, was there a lot of calving problems?
Not as much as you would think.
Really?
Hey, do you know anybody that's got any recips?
Well, funny you mention that. I just happen to have a sponsor this season that has completely changed the embryo transplant game. Let me tell you about Wilkerson Farms. Chad and Amy Wilkerson of Linden, Iowa, had a vision, and what they saw were a lot of people that were making genetic investments in embryos and simply needed someone to manage their investment from inception through calving, then weaning. So 5 years ago, the Wilkerson Farms embryo transplant and calving facility was started. It's located 40 miles west of Des Moines at Linden, Iowa. And to say that it's an intensely managed facility would be an understatement. The 400 plus recips owned by Wilkerson Farms are from two separate ranches, one in South Dakota and one in Nebraska. Ranches that are known for producing great mothering cows. And these cows are under 24-hour care from the time they calve till the time you load that calf on your trailer at 150 days. And if you so choose, at 90 days, you can purchase the recip carrying your embryo. If your genetic investment must have the best chance possible of going from an embryo to a 150-day-old calf, then go to the Wilkerson Farms Facebook page and check out their facility. And feel free to message them or give them a call.
And now, back to the podcast.
You might pull some, but they weren't. I'm talking about 1,000-pound cows.
Yeah,
it wasn't too bad.
But they were still maternal cows.
They were maternal cows. Yep.
All right, so let's go into Full Throttle. As I remember, Full Throttle was a fallborn, wasn't he?
He was a fallborn.
Yeah.
Yep. That's all I raised at that time was fallborn.
Because when you displayed him in Denver, he was small.
He was a baby.
He was a baby.
He was weighing, 350, 400 pounds.
Yeah.
Just a little calf. I had his mama there.
Exactly.
He was sucking her.
In my podcast, we repeatedly talk about setting yourself apart. And I'm sure the way people talked, the part of that crowd in Denver thought you'd fell and hit your head for having a 350-pound calf on display.
Oh, yeah. The only thing was I could have sold him higher for a steer at that time than I've ever sold one if I wanted to cut him. But I just, I had a feeling about him,
And that is something I want to get across to everyone out there. Whenever your gut is telling you something, you got to listen to it.
Yeah, but you sure don't come very often.
No, it don't. It really doesn't. Okay, well, let's talk about Full Throttle then. Going from Denver, got a lot of talk. And then what do? We get
Well, you got a fall calf. You're not going to have any semen ready for anybody in the spring. Naturally, there's something comes along the next year, and this gets kicked on the back burner and forgot about.
Exactly.
And no different than now. If you've got a spring calf on display and you don't get semen, there's something will take his place by the next year.
Exactly. And let me preface all this by saying Dean and I were promoting bulls he was ahead of me, but I was also starting to promote for about 15 years, 40 head of bulls or so at the same time. So we were competitors, but we weren't really competitors, but we experienced a lot of the same headaches and a lot of the same benefits from it. And so that's why our bond, or that's why my bond with Dean is so close. I just respected him, and just traveled down the same road together. And so how did Full Throttle, going from a fall calf that had a year in between, kind of like being redshirted, kind of like being a hot high school athlete and being redshirted your freshman year. How did he come into the starting lineup then?
I used him on my cows and raised calves that won.
So you're telling me that you felt so sure about this bull that you bet the farm on it, basically?
I did. I pretty well win-rode all my cows to him. I switched from Sugar Ray to him, bred the cows, and had a lot of winners.
The rest is history.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it was a point that those cattle back then were better producing cattle as far as semen than these things are now. Mm-hmm. And I've got bulls now. Mm-hmm. And you didn't worry about it back then, from like the Full Throttles and the Meyer 734s and Witch Doctors and those bulls.
Yeah.
If you needed 2,000 units of semen in a week, you about had it.
Exactly.
If you need 2,000 on some of these calves now, maybe in 6 months you got it.
Maybe. And that's, that's a topic for another time. But what you're saying there is so true, because year in and year out, we see the most popular bull or bulls in Denver that everybody's signed up wanting to breed their cows to. They don't ever produce semen until everybody's already got the cows bred. But it's just part of the game, and it's an aggravation, and it's expensive. But you took matters into your own hands with Full Throttle. Let's talk about maybe the next bull that came along that you promoted.
It was a Full Throttle son, a bull called Full Flush.
A bull called Full Flush. How about that?
Actually, where I got his mother, I was up in South Dakota buying cattle, become good friends with a lot of them ranchers up there, and I bought that cow from a guy by the name of Roger Haney.
Oh, no way.
And Roger raised a lot of good cattle.
Yep.
She was a power plant buck.
Really? And Buck was a purebred Simmental bull.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. One of the first black baldy full blood or purebred Simmental bulls.
Yep.
And Power Plant was owned by the Young Ranch, and he was
Maine.
He was purebred Maine, kind of different. He was solid black, little smaller frame, wasn't red and white and rugged. He was a little more refined and
choke neck.
Yeah, choke neck.
Not very big.
No, little smaller, shorter spine, smaller framed, and so Full Flush. Well, let's go ahead and talk about Full Flush, because you ended up doing something historical with Full Flush too. Let's talk about the cloning.
I raised the calf, and he was working, and he could not keep up with the semen we was doing. And
the semen sales.
Right. Mm-hmm. Don Coover at SEK Genetics called me, and he said, would you like to clone this bull? And I said, I have any idea what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And
it was unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, Dolly the sheep and some of the other, deals that you would have saw on media would have been all me and you would have ever heard of cloning. But
anyway, we talked about it, and I said, why not? And he said, let's do it. Let me handle all the semen I need on the deal. I'm going to pay your bill to get this done. I said, well, do it. They come and took a cell line on the bull. At that time, they were putting 2 embryos per cow in each cow, hoping that one might settle. And the results has been really bad at that time. I mean, you couldn't get one.
Well, it was cutting edge. It was the beginning of it, basically.
And anyway, we put them in and had 6 of them.
Had 6 live calves born.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It's ironic. Don Coover and I were good friends, or are good friends too. I haven't talked to Don in a number of years, but Don was one of those guys that had visions. And wasn't, and
still has them.
Still has. I need to call him. I really do. You mentioning this makes me want to just tell a quick story about my experience with that on Heat Seeker. We put in 120 embryos. We had 4 go full term, and they were all messed up and didn't raise a 1.
I don't understand how it works, but certain things clone better than others, just like certain donor cows and IVF embryos have pregnancies better than others, and they don't understand it yet.
And it's just like I always say, you mess with Mother Nature, you're going to get burned one way or the other. And it's I don't know that cloning is quite as hot now in our industries as it has been in the past.
Still costs a bunch.
You
got a lot of risk out there.
Yeah.
The longevity of a clone seems like not as good, even though I had some of them till they was 10 years old. That's an old bull. Most of them you hear of is 3 or 4 years old and they're gone.
Yeah.
And a bunch of that time they're not producing semen anyway. So
did the scheme of things, did it work or did it not work? Did you?
It worked, and we kept up with what semen we needed until he run his course. And
so was the original, was he still freezing then too, or
right.
had he quit?
No, he was still freezing.
Okay. But you were still moving some of the clone semen along with.
We moved quite a bit of the clone semen at the start, and then another bull took his place, which was probably Heat Wave, a bull of
Full Flush and Heat Seeker were about the same time.
They
right?
were about the same time. Yeah.
And actually they complemented each other.
Very much so.
Yeah, there was a lot of Heat Seeker Full Flushes that done a lot of winning, male and female.
Well, your partner, Larry Campbell.
Sure.
He come and bought, I bet I sold Larry's 500-600 Full Flush daughters.
I bet you did too. And he made them work too.
And he bred most of them to Heat Seeker.
Yes, he did. And that's why he bought them, was to do that with. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I miss that old boy a lot. He was a good friend of both of ours. And well, Dean, obviously now you are in the semen industry full blown, and it's a significant part of your operation and your livelihood. And so let's kind of just touch on the variables of the semen industry. Let's go into the promotion side. And I kind of talked about this a little earlier. You had one of the most legendary bull pamphlets in existence. I mean, anybody that can remember it still remembers it vividly. And don't get me wrong, the pictures of the bulls that I believe Christy probably would have took, they were awesome. The layout was awesome. The quality of the paper was awesome. The most awesome part of it was the back page.
Yeah.
And for those of you who remember, you're going to laugh. And for those of you who don't, it was legendary. It was cutting edge. On the back page, he had 4 or 5 girls in jean shorts and kind of tube tops, and they all had on each one of his bulls' caps. I mean, to tell you what, you talk about getting people's attention. It sure did. I'm sure both good and bad, but obviously, if I remember it 30 years later, it was a very successful ad campaign. How did that all come about? Who were the girls, for one thing?
Oh, we didn't know none of the girls. They were from a modeling deal.
They were
at Oklahoma City, and just hired them to put on their short jeans and wear a cap and get their picture made.
It was kind of like Dukes of Hazzard. It was kind of like her or Ellie Mae on the Clampets. They had on the short jean shorts, and so at that time, those bulls would have been Full Throttle, Meyer 734. I forgot about him until you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Witch Doctor,
and how that all come about. We'd run some ads, and it's no different than today. People look at an ad, and most of them get chunked in the trash real quick.
Yes.
And I said, I want to do something with some friggin' thick paper, big time colors, and I want to do something to make people keep them. If I can make them keep them and then pin them up in their barn, I'm going to sell more semen because they're looking at it all the time.
And that was one of the first. Bulls were always in magazines. They were always in the semen directories.
Right.
But people hadn't really thought about making their own individual ranch advertisement.
No, if they did, I didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what, in the history of advertising, I think that's what yet another monumental decision you made that sets you apart. People always want to be set apart. Well, this sets you apart. Not only the quality of the publication or the print, the quality of the paper, but also you had a little twist to it. And as we have evolved into smartphones, a twist is the only thing they look for now.
Well, and after that, I'd go on looking at cattle and stuff, and every barn that I went in, them guys had that pamphlet pinned in their barn by their semen tank.
Yeah, or in their box. It was small enough it could go in their box.
And I've had guys, just the other day, he said, I still got that old pamphlet.
Yep. That would have been what year, you reckon? Boy, that's...
Oh, man.
Mid-90s, probably?
Probably.
No, it'd been early 90s.
Maybe early 90s. Somewhere in there. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who actually designed that? Do you remember? Did Christy?
She set it up, and somebody out of Fort Worth done the design.
So it was an actual professional ad campaign, basically.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that's why. And that's something also that we need to talk about. You just can't give people a second chance at a first impression.
No. First one's always a hit.
Yeah. And that's what you did there. And that's why still some 30 years later, that old boy that you walked into the barn still has it. And it's just, I can't reiterate that enough, how important it is.
And you're going to have some good and you're going to have some bad on that. And the good was all the old ranchers and most of their wives and stuff thought, man, that's pretty neat. The bulls are good. Back page is better, probably.
Yeah.
But I only had really one deal, and you'll think this is kind of funny. There was how it would have got plumb up there. There was a lady in New York called me, and I was getting calls. This is at home, no cell phones. Mm-hmm. You're sitting there.
Exactly, landlines.
When you get home and your answer machine is maxed out, and your phone rings till you just can't take it no more, and it's over. Well, here's a call, and there was no unknown callers or none of that stuff. Then.
No caller ID.
No, none of that stuff. And there was a lady called me, and she was from New York, and man, she is absolutely pissed. And she said, I cannot believe that anybody would stoop that low to try to sell a product.
Really?
And I just sat there and I listened to her. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what, ma'am? If I want to use my daughters to help me on my campaign to do my stuff, I'm going to use them. And she said, oh my, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that was your daughters. So anyway, it was kind of funny.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But
yeah, that's kind of what she deserved, actually.
But
hey, hooker, what size T-shirt do you wear?
Extra large, I guess. I'm not real sure why you're asking, but since we're on the topic, let's talk about one of our sponsors, Custom Tees of Middle Georgia. And they're not only a sponsor, but they are the official apparel provider for the Genuine JBH podcast. Well, obviously, before this new venture started, I couldn't even fold a T-shirt, let alone tell you brand names and where to get one manufactured. With wanting to build and launch an online apparel store for the Genuine JBH podcast, I knew I had to find the right person. Detail-oriented, laid-back personality, and willing to go that extra mile in crunch time. And like a sign from above, I received a text from my old buddy Kirk Sturwald. He said, hey, I hear you might need an apparel guy, and I want to tell you about Todd with Custom Tees down in Georgia. He's doing ours, and we couldn't be happier, and he's so easy to get along with. Well, my old buddy Kirk was right, and I couldn't be more proud of our online merchandise store. And when you're on there shopping, if you have any questions, Todd said don't be afraid to get a hold of him, either email or phone call. The number is listed at the bottom of the site. And if you ever need any caps or custom apparel, be sure and look Todd up. You can go to his Facebook page at Custom Tees of Middle Georgia. That's custom with a K, or search for his website, Custom Tees of Mid GA.
And now, back to the podcast.
Tell me now what's going on at the K-Bar Ranch out there.
Well, just still doing the same old thing. AIN cows, have some bulls that we promote a little bit, some that we sell semen. Probably one of our hotter bulls we have is a bull called Bull Crush.
Yep, I pictured some of them this year.
He's a monopoly son.
What about your marketing now? How are you handling that?
Just pretty much private treaty.
Just private treaty.
I've got some guys on this. We raise quite a few springborns, and we've got some good customers that pretty well buy most of those. We don't run very many ads or any. It's just we've got loyal customers that buy our cattle.
Well, that takes me, what you just said takes me into the why this podcast exists and why it's named Genuine JBH. And that's why you're sitting across from me right now. And it's to help everyone, but especially our younger generations realize the importance from the time they're old enough to know to be genuine in their thoughts and their actions. And you certainly have. And by genuine, I don't mean you got to be a nice guy every time. You know? So right now, it appears to me that you're reaping the benefits of years of being genuine by people coming to your place and getting your calves and you not having to, to have online sales in this. Am I seeing this kind of right? Or?
Well, that kind of followed that track, and of course we expanded by buying some land and doing some things and knew there would be an end to everything. And you can't keep going and you can't keep up with the young ones and doing all that stuff. And you just want to have some security when you gets close to the end of the time to do it. And that's kind of where we fell into.
Well, all right, Dean, we're going to kind of start to wind this deal down. And once again, man, I appreciate it. And hopefully we have brought up a lot of stuff, a lot of history here that's gonna make a lot of people smile. I think you recently just tied into one with a family I was staying in out there, Ryan McIntosh. Didn't you just get a pretty good little Here I Am?
Yep, nice calf. A lot of white on him.
Yep.
Don't think that matters as much as it used used to. And
Nope. So I'm 55, you're 63, so you're still enjoying doing it.
I love it. Yep.
Love it.
Get
And
up every morning and do the same old, same old. Yep.
yeah, and it's a privilege to be able to do that, isn't it?
Yep. Love them old cows.
You bet. You bet. Once again, old buddy, I appreciate you coming in here, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and in your life with several different age groups. And hopefully it's well received. I don't understand how it couldn't be, because it's history and you're genuine. Thanks again.
Thank you. It's been a privilege and an honor. Thank you very
good.
much.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Genuine JBH podcast, sponsored by Amos Welding, Voss Angus, Catalog Livestock Listing Service, powered by SteerBidder.com, Wilkerson Farms, and Custom Tees of Middle Georgia.
If you have questions, comments, or future story ideas, you can contact us directly by emailing genuinejbh@gmail.com. You can also check out our Facebook page at Genuine JBH Podcast or Instagram at JBradleyHook. That's JBradleyHook. There you can find my Snap code. And please join our big Snap family. And be sure and check out all the Genuine JBH apparel at our online store.